Well, science works by scientific principles which exclude.
Openly with the other side. That's the
Oh,
point.
yes,
the
right.
discussion,
No.
The open discussion with the other side is being prohibited by, quote, the evolutionist, unquote, who
Well,
probably most of them
I
never
would
read
love,
Darwin.
I would love to see much more about religion taught in schools, but it would have to be religion, not a religion, or a specific doctrine.
I
Yes.
think the substance of your objection to the way creationists are treated by the educational establishment is that it isn't being taught as science. It shouldn't be taught as science because it isn't science.
But there are
Evolution is science.
There are
What you're
scientific
propounding
approaches.
is philosophy.
Yeah.
Okay, wait a minute, hold on. I rewrote Genesis 2 or 3 times over the last couple of years. If you take Genesis, just pull it off of the internet. I'll give you 4 or 5 places you can get it. Pull it off the internet and go through and do some substitution. You substitute the word scientist for God in Genesis, and then you end up asking a question. What's all this stuff with the waters? Why would a scientist separate the waters from the waters? What is this all about? Well, I'll ask the question I've asked before. Anybody here work at Hanford? Why would you separate waters from waters? No.
Hydrogen and oxygen?
No.
Water, still hydrogen and oxygen.
Yeah.
So,
Heavy water and light water. Nuclear reactions. Stars. How did some shepherd 6,000 years ago know that you separate water from water and you can get stars?
I think that's reading behind. I think that's reading between the lines on a scale, on a par with playing Beatles records backwards. So Paul McCartney is
When
dead.
you do it on a verse-by-verse basis, you end up with comparison, and you go,
Yeah.
there isn't any difference between.
Okay, we're gonna
Yeah,
cut time on
right.
him. He's got a question.
Right, yeah.
Rather than make a statement, I'd like to introduce my question so you understand why I'm asking. The question is about the uniformity of the galaxies and the universe that we see. In a bang or an explosion, we see a concentrated evidence at the center, and the farther we get away, the more dispersed or less concentrated the evidence is. If we have a big bang that started everything we can see, why does the universe seem to be fairly uniformly concentrated, other than, of course, your isolated galaxies and stuff, but as far as space is concerned, there isn't where do we find the center of this big bang? That's kind of the question. Do you understand what I'm saying there?
I kind of think I do, but I don't know. Do you have an
I
answer
don't know.
to
I don't
that?
know the astrophysics or anything on that, and it's a little bit off the topic, but somebody else might know it.
I mean, basically what I'm saying is it's hard to see a center. Where is the center?
Okay,
Okay.
Oh, there isn't.
Came from
Okay.
the center.
There's no center.
I mean,
Yeah.
we
There's
assume
no
like when
center.
something
That
blows
concept
up,
is
the
flawed.
energy comes from a center going out in all directions.
It's
How do you
called
know
bang,
that?
Yeah, big bang, right.
How do you know that was
That's
that kind
the
of bang?
premise
How
of
do you
the
know it
whole
wasn't like a
theory.
directional explosion or
That's the point
something?
of the theory.
That is the premise of the whole theory, that it all
There was a
started in one
concentrated
spot,
mass.
which was in the
If
middle.
you look around the room,
So,
Pardon me.
Yeah.
Pardon me. Please, more than one person
Quiet.
speaking. Why don't we start with this gentleman?
as the eldest,
There you go.
if you look around the room here, you see a bunch of primates and sold apes. And we're pretty darn limited in what we can perceive, even with the help of modern instruments, and quite limited in what we can understand. And so,
Is this answering the
and
question?
I feel sympathetic toward the concept of a intellectual principle, a creative principle in the universe that you could call God. But I'm just, creating this out of my imagination, and I certainly would take that basis and use it to justify and rationalize the sayings of Hebrew priests of 3,000, 4,000 years ago. I think that's putting the cart way ahead of the horse. And I'm quite content. I am a constructionist in one sense, a strict constructionist. I believe we are born again. But Jesus didn't, I doubt that Jesus said that born again means anything other than born again. And so we get further chances for whatever reason may be running this thing, or whatever principles may be operating here. I'm not going to know them. I find these discussions extremely interesting, but in my view, not very important.
I'll take a whack at Marshall's question having to do with the uniformity of matter in the universe and the isotropy of the background radiation. And the view of that is not that there's space out here all around and this infinite fireball of exploding matter started at the beginning and expanded into the space. The astrophysical view of that is more like it is space itself. It's the geometry that's expanding. And so this allows everything to go more or less uniformly with it. There are different analogies that are done for that. There's the one where you paint the spots on a balloon, blow the balloon up, and or maybe what you should do is attach little spots to the balloon because you want the balloon to get bigger, but you don't want the spots to get bigger. Or there's another analogy that's like raisins in raisin bread. You know, you got all these raisins here to start. It's all compact and they all expand out when the bread bakes, but the raisins don't get much bigger. So it's a geometry thing rather than an explosion thing. And that may not be a satisfactory answer, but that's probably the simplest way I can put it. I did want to respond briefly to Dan's issue. And it is permissible, I think, even now, to teach either creationism or intelligent design or topics of that kind in the schools if you put it in a class that's religious history or history of philosophical thought or other kinds of things, but it's not allowed to be called science because the whole methodology of science is different from the methodology of biblical exegesis or contemplation about theology or anything like that. Not only that, nobody, not even the ACLU, attempts to tell you what you can teach in Sunday school. Nobody's coming around and telling you can't tell about Noah's flood or anything, whether you believe it to be factual, mythical, hypothetical, or whatever. But we have had cases, of course, where evolution was prohibited to be taught, and people occasionally still trying to get it out of the schools, and particularly out of the science curriculum. So there's a bit of an unfair comparison there.